My name is Jody Franko, and I am the owner of Rose of the Winds Travel. And I started this business 3 years ago because of my love of meeting new people, seeing new places, learning about new cultures. And I felt like it was something that I wanted to be able to share with others. So many times travel to different destinations, more exotic destinations, can be a little scary. So in the last 2 years I've put together several small group adventures. And today I'm going to share with you some slides from our adventure in 2017. I took a small group to Nepal, and we traveled from the south to the north of the country and saw all of the different highlights. Today I appreciate this opportunity to share with you a presentation of what that trip was, the places we went, and the different activities that we did while we were there. So our trip was in October of 2017, so just a few months ago, and the group was primarily folks that I knew from Floyd and friends of friends, and we traveled from Charlotte. It's a long flight, and we made our way and landed in Kathmandu. And this trip is really ideal because my husband and I, traveled there the year prior, and we scouted out everything. That's really important to me, to first understand the dynamics of the country, to pick out the amazing lodges to stay in, pick the activities, think of the smartest itinerary, how we get from place to place. I really value being able to walk often when traveling, not just sitting and seeing. For me, it's very much about experiential. So we added several hikes from village to village that were supported. Our vehicles carried the luggage, so you didn't have to carry all of that. You got to see the countryside, you got to be in different villages and see how people live. So being off the beaten track really added a great element. Yes, we started in October, and that's the season of Dasein. And Dasein is the most festive holiday in Nepal. And they're celebrating the goddess Durga. And people are out of school and off work and in their villages. And so, whereas I was concerned it would be a more difficult travel time because of transportation and banks and things like that, it turned out to be a blessing because we really got to see people being with each other, playing, and Dasein swings. And I'll show you the swings a little bit later. So this first slide you see is our beautiful group when we were in our first stop, and that was in Nagarkot. And we stayed at this beautiful place called Peaceful Cottage. And our friend Carol and Karen own those. And those are two fellas. Those are male names. And it is perched high up on a hillside. And when you're lucky in the morning or in the evenings, the clouds part and you can see the giant Himalayan mountains. And I'll never forget, I'm looking and waiting for the clouds to part, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden our new friend Carol comes up and he lifts my head like this to see the top of the peaks that were so much higher than I ever could have imagined. Our route that we traveled early on was when we landed in Kathmandu Airport, and we headed a little bit east. We went to Nagarkot. We traveled down to Dhulikhel. We spent a day an evening, 2 days, 1 night, at Namo Buddha Monastery. And then we traveled north to Pokhara, a really great lakeside city that is very special to visit. We traveled down from there to Lumbini, which is the birthplace of the Buddha. And then we traveled over to Chitwan, which is Nepal's jungle, where there are rhinoceros and tigers, which we didn't get to see, and elephants and crocodiles, and it was an amazing 3 days there. And then we traveled back to Kathmandu to finish off the trip. And we were there for 14 days. It's just quite beautiful. This is a picture of Machu Picchu, which is known as Fishtail Mountain, and Fishtail Mountain's in Pokhara. And it's a sacred mountain to the Nepalese people. And it's one of the few peaks that they don't allow people to climb. They've kept it sacred. Nepal is quite extraordinary. welcoming and special because it is a country where Hindus and Buddhists live side by side. And the religions have not melded, but they have things in common, and they're not as distinct as they are sometimes in other countries. And the nature of the people is so warm and welcoming and kind that it has made it a great place to travel. On top of that, so many people speak English. They study it in school. And so as a tourist being there, it's quite easy to get around. It's a broken English, but most people can communicate. Here's a picture of just the beautiful prayer wheels that when traveling you have an opportunity to spin them and learn more about the Buddhist traditions. This is a picture from Namo Buddha, which is the monastery outside of Kathmandu that we hike to and spend time there. I call this drive-by photography. We were in the car, and even though the road trips are difficult because the roads aren't great, and so the road trip becomes long, the scenery outside the window is the best you can ever imagine. This was full moon in Bhaktapur, and just a picture of one of the temples. So like I said, we were there for Dasein, and Dasein is this great celebration. The women are in red, and they walk around to the temples, and they offer puja and blessings. So puja would be, they have their puja tray, and on the puja tray are all of the different items that help them give thanks and offer blessings and say their prayers. And so they would go to the temple, and there would be music, and there would be, they burn butter lamps, which would be ghee butter, and that's how another blessing. But so what's really beautiful is to see the families out together, and the mother often has the tray, and her children will be behind her. And so in tradition, like our children learn from us what it means to be sacred, to be holy, we've got the opportunity to see the children learn from their parents. So one thing that they often do is that they ring a bell as part of the prayer. And so the mom will ring the bell, and the child will come right behind and ring the bell. They do a tika or puja where they put vermilion and different items right here on their third eye, on their forehead. And it's really adorable to see the children emulating their parents doing that. There's a lot to learn. Our first day there was the big day of celebration. And our dear friend Carol, who lives in Bhaktapur, who owns Peaceful Cottage, gifted us with a day of going to the temple and explaining things and walking around with us and showing us what the different rituals were. It was quite a gift. If you see this little girl, she's dressed up for the holidays, and she has a tika right on her forehead. And then this gentleman is taking care of things inside of the temple. It's a time when people are off work, and so they're celebrating, and they make a homemade rice wine that they use in these little teeny terracotta cups that they drink from, and that's part of the blessing as well. And it's a home brew, so it's quite fascinating to think that it's another way that their simple, sustainable living, which Nepal is filled with, that's one more thing they create for themselves is their rice wine. And it's really fun because during Dasein is when the new harvest blessings are asked for the coming season, but it's also when they harvest the rice of this year. So it's a full circle time. We headed to Nagarkot, and we stayed at Peaceful Cottage. And from there, besides the beautiful views and the lovely place where we got to stay, the food that we got to enjoy, the company we got to keep, there are two really lovely hikes from there. And so those hikes, when we offer a trip, are optional. Do you want to sit on the deck and look at the beautiful view and write, read, contemplate, or if you feel like being active, then we'll give you that opportunity too where we can. So this was on a hike to a fire tower, and I never made it. Everybody kind of left a little bit before me, and I was walking slowly. And so this year when we go back, I'm going to the fire tower. I missed it last year. This is a little shot of Peaceful Cottage, and what I really love about it is that it's family owned. And these two brothers with their mom and their dad built this maybe in the 70s. In 2015, when they had their devastating earthquake, it got really terribly damaged, along with so many other places. We were the first guests back in 2016, the year that Tom and I scouted it, and it was really meaningful to be there as their first guests, to see the effort that they had made, and just to share, if you've ever seen the Best Marigold Hotel, the Best Little, something like that, it was really like that. They were trying so hard to get it up and running, and it wasn't when we got there, and it was when we left. And I feel like that's why we bonded so much, because I got to appreciate the effort they put into it. That room at the top is a yoga practice room. It's quite extraordinary to go up there. It's a 360 view. These are some of our travelers, and we had a mother-daughter on the trip. We had best friends. We had husband and wife. So it's always interesting to see who comes together for any of our travels. Within our circle, we became friends. People are still in touch. We created community, and not just with each other, but this next picture is a nighttime sitting on this amazing deck in the outdoors with the Himalayas all around and the smaller mountains and the countryside. And this Nepali fella, just like, he wanted to know who we were, and we wanted to know who he was, and he had a friend. And so it was just festive time outside, getting to know each other. It is just beautiful there, and so it's a photographer's paradise. This was on a walk, and it is not unusual. Witnessing transportation in a foreign country is fascinating, just to see what the roads are like, what the vehicles are like. There's always all these different kinds of vehicles. There's tuk-tuks, and there's bicycle rickshaws, and I'll show you more later, but this just fascinated me that these men on the way to work were piled into a truck, and I don't know how many there were. There were 20 plus men in there, and they were very friendly, waving and smiling. We traveled next to Bhaktapur, and Bhaktapur is a UNESCO heritage city. It is a living museum. It is a walled city, and within the walls are so many temples and monuments and authentic housing. So to go there is to truly experience another time and place. In this picture, if you were to go back, if you looked at old pictures, you would see the many buildings and the many monuments that fell in 2015, and thankfully they're rebuilding, and they've got some outside help, and it's a major job. And one thing that felt really rewarding for us was in this experience, for Dasein, I was saying that they have puja, and part of puja can be a call and response music, and so people get together in the temples and in these little buildings, and within them they're playing music, and they're using their instruments, and they're praying. And we were invited to join them, and they invited us in, and they gave us instruments, and they offered tea, and we spoke with them in between song, and they tried to get us to, they tried to enunciate so we could learn some of the music. It was an amazing experience, and we were so appreciative that it wasn't an obligation, but we chose to give a little financial offering, and it was individual from each person. And once we did that, they were quiet, they were touched, and they pointed to one of the beams in this building, and it was broken, and it was just scabbed together in a 2x4 holding it up, and it was not in great shape. And they were so touched, they said that the little bit of money we gave them was going to enable them to fix their temple. So to to have that sort of real opportunity with someone in another country was quite extraordinary for us. So it's men and women together, and they take different turns. Who's going to play the harmonium? Who's going to sing the lead? And it was very obvious they'd been together for years. And at the same time, the man on the left of the picture was quite young, and he's playing the tablas. He was extraordinary, and you can see that the next generation is also staying involved, which is important. Many traditions being lost. It abounds with temples, and the temples are fascinating. They open them up at different times for prayer. You can peek inside, and the architecture is phenomenal. It's really extraordinary architecture. All of those struts, the diagonal pieces that go from roof down to the building, are intricately hand carved. And Bhaktapur is renowned for its wood carvers and its woodworking. Just a beautiful picture of another temple. And what happens here is you see all these different animals, and so up at the top is the animal that's considered to be the lowest in hierarchy, and as it comes down, it's who's more fierce, who's more grand, and you see that they've placed us at the top, at the bottom, which is to be the strongest. Yep. We stayed at Shiva Guest House in Bhaktapur, and again, two different brothers own that. It's Naris and Kailash, and their mom. We've gotten to know them over the 2 years, and it was an honor that their mother came in. Every day she does tikka for her family, and she included us in tikka that day. An added value to the trip and to our lives to become more aware when we travel, and not just look and see, but to do and to learn. And so in Bhaktapur, we included several in-depth dialogues with artisans. And this is us meeting with Madhu. He is a master Thangka painter. And Thangkas are Tibetan paintings that tell the story of Buddhism. And so he has studied his whole life. He travels the world, actually, to teach and to speak about Buddhism and to speak about the art. And he welcomed us into his studio for what we thought was going to be a talk about Thangkas and what Thangkas mean, because they have a lot of symbolism, and we can show some Thangkas later in the show. And to our delight, what we spoke about was ideals of good living that are universal across all religions. And we spoke about our lives, and we had true dialogue. And then at the end, he introduced Thangkas, and he talked about the pain, and he talked about the meaning of them. And then we looked at all of his work, and we met the different students that are studying with him. Some were 10, 11, 12. And then later on, there were students all up to the working to be master painters as well. And Madhu is potentially coming to Greensboro to speak at the college there. And if he does, I'm hoping to bring him up to Floyd. The painting on the right is the 8 auspicious symbols. And they are good luck symbols that folks in Nepal like to have in their home. So we brought some of those home as gifts, holiday gifts, and for other people. The other in-depth dialogue that we did was at the Pottery Square, and the Pottery Square is the center of life for a lot of people in Bhaktapur. It's another thing that they are very well known for, and it's a community pottery, and so together they have all of their materials in different piles, and they have a square where you've got your area and you put your pottery out to dry, and so it's an amazing glimpse at an ancient craft and how it's still being done. We learned a lot, and they also let us play with clay for a while too and make little things to bring home. I spoke about vehicles, and if you look at the left side, this vehicle is actually pretty much just a gravely tiller, And it's beefed up, and in the back of it is a wagon, and that's what they drive through the streets there. It's their utility truck. So it was pretty fun to see just the creative vehicles that they use for their work. Dasein is a time of games, and so you can see the fellas here gathering and playing games and laughing and telling stories. It looked like fun. I wanted to sit down and learn some of the games with them, but I gave them their space as a polite traveler. When we were there, the literacy is rather high in Nepal, but there's still the town square meetings. And so this is a picture of a town square meeting where different municipality speakers came, and hundreds and hundreds of people came and sat and listened to what was coming up for the new year, how they explained what had happened in the government the year before. They had entertainment, and it was a look at how their society works. Bhaktapur. So it's fascinating just to walk through these alleys and these roads, small roads there. And it's safe. And so with the group we were introduced, and then everybody had free time just to go off on their own. And we were walking through the street, and I caught a glimpse of this inside this doorway that was fascinating. What was she making? And was it for family? Was it for people to come? And I snapped pictures because it really was intriguing. And later on, when our friend Carol came and visited with us, and I said, "So where should we eat tonight?" He said, "I have the place for you." And he walked us back to this restaurant, and it's called Bada, and it's a Nawari lentil pancake. And when you travel, an important thing to do is to be aware of hygiene. You don't want to get travelers dysentery. So there are basic things that I help my travelers understand so that they can stay well. So I'm always really cautious what I eat, what I drink. And this was, by all outward appearances, a place that I might have questioned, but because I was taken there by a local and he knew the safety of the food, I was comfortable eating it. And it turned out to be a highlight of our trip because it was the most local thing I think that we did. And these are two shots just walking through the town of Bhaktapur and just seeing this amazing billy goat sitting on a wall ready for his photograph to be taken, and this man was in his kitchen and preparing food for folks. It's a simple place, and so how do they keep the streets clean? With a broom and a dustbin, and they carry it all away. And a lot of things when traveling in developing countries aren't just inside buildings closed away. They're often out in the open with fresh air, and so you can see that this tailor is set up just on the side of the road, and he's got his projects, and if you have something you need sewn, you just bring it to him. The earthquake was terrible, as I said, and these are a couple of shots just to show what hasn't changed. The cracks in the buildings are being propped up and held by pieces of wood. The rubble is still visible in some places, and that rubble will not be hauled away to a dump. Those bricks will be cleaned and they'll all be reused. And this is Durbar Square, and this just shows that it's under reconstruction, and so for some tourists that might be something that isn't pretty and they might not want to go there. My sense of it is I like to travel in a place where we make a positive difference. We're not just overriding the local community. And Nepal is truly a place that needs tourism, appreciates tourism, supports tourism. Harvest scenes are everywhere, just where the rice hay has been bundled up. So as part of Dasein, there is an auspicious time to harvest the rice. And during our walk from Namo Buddha down to Panoti, we got to see, and it was amazing, the harvest of rice. And on my wish list of things to see was just to see rice growing and what it looked like. And we got to see everything. We got to see how they dig their ditches to drain the water. And then we got to see how they cut it and they lay it out. And this is all during a 4-hour walk. We're watching this as we walk down this beautiful road. So they cut it and then it dries for a while. And then we could hear a sound, and it was the sound of the thresher. And when we got there, we were so amazed because that thresher was not gas powered. It was not electric powered. It was foot powered, just like a treadle sewing machine. And they would be beating, tapping it with their foot, and this wheel's going around, and they take a bundle of rice and they put the head on there, and there's little curtains all around, and all that rice falls down and they harvest the rice. So we really got to see the entire process from draining to harvest. And then the pictures here are 2 women who are winnowing by hand. So they're getting the chaff off of the rice so that they can store it. And they'll have big tarps and cloths down in the middle of squares and near their homes out in the sun, and they're drying it so that it can be preserved for the winter. Nepal is fascinating for its self-sustainability. I said that there just wasn't such a thing as dirt without something growing. If there was a patch of soil, there was ginger growing, or turmeric, or bananas, or just like a plethora of foods that they grow for themselves. You can see by the photographs how much of what they use are natural materials. Because of that, there just isn't a lot of plastic, but a lot of just beautiful things made out of natural materials. And you can see here the building is made out of mud, basically. It's just bricks made out of dirt that have been laid up, and then so they make great use of the materials that are available. A big topic when you're traveling is what to know and understand and how to relate to people when they beg. And I went to India first, and I knew that was going to be an important thing to understand. And it's a really big topic I could almost do an entire segment on. But it's really important to realize that begging can be an industry, and children can be almost children trafficked in order to be beggars, to make money for the people who are trafficking them. So you have to understand the story before you give. And so we decided to take pencils as something to give, because we felt like pencils were power, pencils were knowledge, and it was fun. It was fun to have these pencils and a way to relate to the kids. I don't know that that's the ultimate answer of how I want to be able to give and to share when I travel. It's something I'm studying and learning more and more about. But this is us meeting some children and sharing pencils along the way. A scene on the road. This fellow was at the barber, and it was a very simple shop, and he looks very happy with the service. Bhaktapur is fascinating for seeing how it was in the days of old before all of the plumbing and all of the electricity. And so throughout Bhaktapur, you can see 172 temples and monasteries, 152 wells, 77 water tanks, and 172 pilgrim shelters. And the wells were just beautiful, beautiful. So many of them. A few still in use, a few still had water, and a lot were defunct because what happened was the earthquakes broke the channels of water that were feeding them. But they still are just glorious to look at. Nepal is a depressed economy. Every day about 150 Nepali men travel abroad for work. And they're going to Saudi Arabia and different Arabic countries to be laborers. And it's a big drain on the society in Nepal. But they are trying to earn the money that they need for their families and themselves. From Bhaktapur, we went to Himalayan Sunrise, which is in Dhulakel. It's a family-owned hotel, and this family has a beautiful son and a daughter, the mom and the dad, and then the extended family comes in and out. And again, I really appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit of the Nepali people, and tourism is a great opportunity. So the son is studying tourism, and he goes to school and he studies and he learns and he gets ideas and he brings those back to the family. And they are very welcoming. And our first year there, they gave us a tour of their garden, their self-sufficient garden. They grow so many foods. They have a mill where they mill their grains. They had a cow. And the delight for us was going into the garden, seeing the food growing, watching them pick the food, and then eating that for dinner. And they were kind enough now for my tours when I take people back to again offer the tour, to explain the foods, how they grow, let us pick them, go into the kitchen, learn how to make a dish or two, and then go upstairs, they finish cooking, and then we all eat the dinner, and it's really quite an intimate experience and very personalized. So we do a farm-to-table tour and cooking class, and in this you can see that we're in the mill, and so they mill their own grains, but they also mill other people's grains, and so the people that come to get their grains milled can pay either in product or they can pay in Nepali rupees. So it's just, I think, a style of living that Floyd probably enjoyed several decades ago. And that's one thing I love about Nepal, is how it feels like the home that I appreciate here in Floyd. The people of Nepal highly value family, their spirituality, living close to the land, working hard. And to me, that describes Floyd. Mm-hmm. I told you all about the Dasein swing. And the Dasein swing is a Nepali tradition for Dasein holiday. And what they do is they gather this giant bamboo and they build these swings. And these swings, because the apex is so high, the arc is huge. And so the swing here, you can see to the left, it's a cliff. And so when you swing out, you just see mountains and a valley, and they're very much fun. And the tradition is fascinating. The tradition is that the Nepali people believe every year your feet need to leave the ground at least once. And so that's why the swing. And I learned that when I said, "Can I swing?" And they teased me and they said, "Oh, you don't need to swing. You flew in an airplane. You came here. You've already had that blessing." But it's too much fun. We went out during the full moon and swang, and it's very social. Grown-ups are there. Kids are there. People drive, like, they heard about a good swing, and so they jump in the car and they go to another swing, and everybody shares. And I had bubbles there, and all the kids wanted to play with bubbles, and so it's a community event. A tradition is to share appreciation through gifts. So with the family at Himalayan Sunrise, we all shared gifts. It was fun. I had brought some from home, which was a treat. So we headed to Namo from there. Himalayan Sunrise is on one end of the road. There's traffic and city behind us, but none in front of us. And it was a dirt road, a path most of the way. I'd say we probably walked for about 3 hours. And it was rolling. It was not difficult. And it was beautiful. One of my friends who is from this area, and the woman who's from Colorado, said it was the most beautiful hike they'd ever done. So along the trail, it's just quite fun to see. The family on the right, they're on a picnic, and so they had these grass plates, and they had carried their food, and they were heading to Namo also. Namo is a Buddhist monastery, and a lot of people do pilgrimage there. So this was a family that was walking up there. Those two little girls were adorable. And we walked and we walked. The sun was shining, and along the way there's small holy places that are part of a community. The road was rough, and so I just took a picture of the muddy road. We were there right after monsoon, and so the roads were still repairing. Namo Buddha is a community of monks that's outside of Dulakel, and it's based on a story of when the Buddha sacrificed himself for a hungry mother tiger who wanted the only way they could live was to feed on a human being, and the human being was the Buddha in another lifetime. So this is an honoring of that, and they invite us, they allow us to come, and we stay in very simple housing, and we go to their puja, which is grand. It's in this huge hall that is filled with silk banners and statuary, and all the monks are sitting on their benches, and they have their cacophony of drums and giant horns, and they are chanting, and it lasts for about an hour. They seem not to notice us. We just sit quietly in the back. You can come when you can leave when you need to. It's very welcoming. You cannot take a picture in there, or else I'd show you how extraordinary it was. But just to be in the midst of the sound and the holiness was a positive experience for us. From there, we walked around the monastery and saw and met people, and then they invited us to join them for supper. And so to sit with the monks, who are anywhere from 5 years old to 95 years old, was a great experience. There were other guests there that we visited with that were from all over the world. And we got to see the simple yet tasty food that they eat. Prayer flags everywhere. So my limited understanding of Buddhism, so when the monks were doing puja, they were reciting mantras, and mantras are holy prayers. And on a prayer flag are mantras. And so the belief is that all of these flags that are filled with all of these holy words, blessings, prayers, when the wind blows on them, it blows those prayers out into the world. And so I believe that the monks' belief system is that they aren't praying for themselves, they're praying for the world. And the prayer flags are doing the same thing. It's sending that goodness out into the world. And here we are walking down to Panoti. So the walk up to Namo Buddha rolls. The walk down to Panoti is very, very lovely. It's about 4 hours, like I said, but it's a glorious walk. And going there, you see so much. You get to see the different villages, and you get to see the different folks. You get to see how rice is grown and how rice is harvested. A view of a home as we walked from village to village, and you can see that livestock is a major part of their life. They've got goats and chickens, and because it's a Hindu society, they do have cows, but they don't eat beef, and they milk water buffaloes, and I can promise you it is the best yogurt. It is so good. And just precious scenes along the way. These children up in their windows saying hello. People washing their clothing in the river as we walked by. And I've got some pictures here of the rice harvest as it was happening. The picture on the left is the rice growing, and the picture on the right is after it's been harvested and the hay is laid out to dry. Panoti's the point at the end of the walk. It's another UNESCO heritage town or city, and it was another glimpse of temples and holiness in Nepal. From there, it was a long drive. I will kid you not. The roads were not good. There's just 2 lanes, and so there's a lot of truck traffic, and our driver was very safe and drove well, and it took 9+ hours, so it was a very long day in the vehicle. But along the way, the views were beautiful, and it was worth it to get to the destination. Pokhara is it's their resort town, and it's on a lake. And in the midst of it, there are outstanding things to do and to see. It's the point where many people take off for their treks. And so if you're doing the Annapurna trek or the Gorapani Poon Hill trek, you start from there. So there's a whole backpacker culture. Hang gliding, I've got great stories about hang gliding there. So that's another great opportunity. And there's wonderful hikes, there's waterfalls, there's going out on the lake, and then there's the Peace Pagoda, which is a great destination. Morning sunrise up at Sarankat was quite beautiful. You could see the sunrise on Macha Puchare, and then you could see just the city coming awake down below. And then there's Lake Fua, which is beautiful. You can rent a boat and go paddling yourself. Or if you want to go over to the Peace Pagoda, you can pay somebody and they will row you across and drop you off. So here we are catching a ride across the lake. Here's the view as we started climbing up. And I'm not a strong hiker, but I can walk and walk and walk. And this was the steepest hike. It took 45, 50 minutes, an hour, something like that. And we just set our own pace, and it wasn't dangerous. It was just strenuous to climb up, up, up. But the views were rewarding. So this is a view looking back at Pokhara. And we make it to the top. And the Peace Pagoda was a contribution from Japan after World War II. And so there are 4 sides, 4 different Buddhas. Buddhism is an important religion in Japan as well. And so that's a common sharing between Nepal and Japan. And so this is a destination of just great beauty at the pinnacle of this hill. On the walk down, there was a Dasein swing to reward us, and we played with these kids there, and it was awesome to see my guests having so much fun. We heard a rustling in the woods, and we got quiet and we looked, and there were a lot of monkeys in the trees. And so we sat there and took pictures and watched all different generations of monkeys moving through the trees and feeding, and it was extraordinary to watch. This male was telling us that it was time to move on. These are our friends at Grand Holiday, and they have a beautiful hotel, and they were really great hosts. And they, I had not known, also own a tour company. And so I'm very grateful that this year I am going to be contracting with them for our tour. And they've been in the business for a long time. They own 2 amazing hotels in Pokhara, and they help trekkers and travelers from all over the world. So I feel like we're in really good hands with them. It's been great to work with them. It's important to me to work locally. And it's important also to work locally with folks that really come through with a great product. So I'm very confident about this year's trip coming up. This carnage from this landslide was left on the side of the road. We did not see the accident. We were not on the road when the landslide happened. It happened, and then they had to close the road. So on the way to Lumbini, we had, I'd say, probably a 2.5, 3 hour delay while they were clearing up a landslide that happened 2 days ago. So that was just very telling of what life is in this country. They have earthquakes and they have monsoons, and so for a developing country with limited funds, it's very hard to keep the infrastructure in tip-top shape. But this is our friend who traveled with us, bravely tasting foods along the side of the road. And I too ate some of those little fried fish, and they were delicious. It was brave. We stopped in Lumbini for a day, and Lumbini is the birthplace of the Buddha. And so there's a a great monument to the Buddha there and the telling of the Buddha's story. And also, countries from all around the world have built monasteries there. So how many there are, I don't know, 20, 30 beautiful buildings, beautiful monasteries that have outstanding architecture and beautiful statuary and art and grounds. And so when you're in Lumbini, you go from monastery to monastery seeing the manifestation of a people's love for Buddhism and the Buddha, and it's very nice. It's very beautiful. This is a few examples of the beauty up at Lumbini. Our last stop was Chitwan. So that's around down this part of the country. We started at Kathmandu, up to Pokhara, Lumbini. Now we're down at Chitwan. And Chitwan is Nepal's jungle. And I'd never seen a rhinoceros before, and now I've seen several rhinoceros, and they were at a great distance, and they didn't care about us, and it was really exciting. The environment was wonderful. It was not hot, it was not mosquito-y, the temperature was great. While we were there, we stayed in this beautiful rustic, it appeared rustic, it was very comfortable, but it was natural material lodge. We were well fed every day. All of that food was included. We did a jeep safari. We did a jungle walk, and we went and met the Taru people. These are just beautiful pictures. When you're down on the lake, I mean in the river, you can see the great Himalayan Annapurna range out in the distance. So the Taru people of Chitwan are the native people, and they lived there before DDT. They were immune to malaria. So even though a lot more people have been able to come and live there, they still live quite traditionally, and so to see how they lived was very educational and interesting. They are very sustainable. They use natural materials for their homes. They have an amazing diet of foods that are available. And they have a great tradition of dance. And the dance is used for religious reasons. And it looks very martial to me. They do a stick dance that looked like it would be martial. I'm not sure, but so we went to an evening performance where the women danced, the men danced. They had musicians, and then at the end they invited whoever was brave enough to come up and dance with them. And that was a lot of fun. And we went on this jungle safari where we saw the rhinoceros and we saw deer. They've got barking deer. They're a lot smaller than ours. And peacocks. We were in the tiger grass, but it wasn't the season for tigers to be down, but tigers are seen in this park. And that would be a treat. Our chance of seeing a tiger is better this year because we're going later in the season. Here's a barking deer. This is a buck. You can see he's got his big rack. But it's paradise, isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know why it happened, but I thought it was awesome seeing this man. It was basically like a puddle lake, and this man and his wife were out there fishing. And it didn't look that deep, but we drove into part of it. We were going to drive through it apparently with our driver, and we didn't make it. We got really stuck. And I posed for a picture. I didn't really drive, but we were there for quite a while. It was pretty hilarious. I felt for them. I mean, you can see we were deep in the mud. Oh. And they tried to rock us to get us out, and finally they just gave up and got another vehicle for us and took us back. But that's part of the adventure traveling, you know. Wouldn't have planned it, but it was fun. It was hilarious. They use elephants in Nepal and in Chitwan especially. So, for better or worse, we went to a breeding camp, and we got to see the beautiful animals, and we also were educated how they're used. and it's controversial. We finished up in Kathmandu, and we stayed in Tamil, which is known as Backpackers Kathmandu. And it's delicious, it's fun, it's contemporary in that there's spas there and massage. The shopping is phenomenal. They have for sale amazing backpacker knockoff wares. So if you ever needed any of those things, the clothing is phenomenal. The handicrafts are outstanding. It's just a really fun place to finish up and go out for amazing meals. And this is there's also a lot of temples and holy places there too. So we did about a 3 or 4 hour tour, and this view is from up at the top of one of the temples. And there are a lot of names of these temples that I could try and say, but it's difficult. And just like the names of the families and some of the people, I would honor them more if I would learn how to say them, but I'm afraid I would say them so wrong that I'm choosing not to at this point. So we walked through and we saw just life on the street, and this was fascinating. So these guys made this contraption for sharpening knives, and it uses a pulley system and it gets the wheel going around really fast, but it's just creative economy. And generations old. This is Himalayan salt, which you can buy there, which has got so many of the trace elements and nutrients that are really great to get in salt. So I found it fascinating to see all the different colors, and it was a really great souvenir to bring back home. And walking through the market is one of my favorite things when I travel. And just to see how people live, what they live with, and then to see the foods that they buy from. And it's extraordinary. This is pasta, but then in the back are all of these different kinds of lentils, which they call dal. And I think that we were in a place where they showed us 9 different kinds of lentils, all different sizes and colors and different flavors. So I could talk about the cuisine. I don't know if I have a great picture coming up. But the cuisine in Nepal is delicious. It's simple food. They serve chicken as a main meat. They have great vegetarian dishes, and what they serve is dal bhat. Again, handicrafts are amazing. These men made these items that are in their shop. They're metalsmiths. And so you've got Dasein, and then it's like 2 weeks of holiday, and then time that's not holiday. And then it all culminates with Tihar, which is also known as Diwali in India, and Tihar in Nepal. And again, it's a great festival. It's called the Festival of Lights. And when they do their tikka, they use these multicolored powders to make the tikka, so it's not just the traditional red, it's all these different colors. And it's beautiful. I just love seeing the different forms of transportation. So this is a bicycle rickshaw. Patan is a little area in Kathmandu. We went there. They have their Durbar Square, which is the government center and where so many religious buildings are. And again, the architecture is extraordinary. I could try and say this, but this is one of the very holy temples, stupas, that's in Kathmandu, and it's a beautiful walk up all these steps, and there's lots of monkeys there. Definitely one of the stops you want to make when you're in Kathmandu. And Bodhanath is another Buddhist temple, and this one is outside of Kathmandu, but not very far, and definitely a place to go. The giant medicine wheel on the right was one of the largest I saw in our travels. Prayer, I said medicine wheel. It's one of the largest prayer wheels I saw. And this is one of the monasteries. This is just a picture of a spice mix that I thought was exciting. all the different spices in there. And more pictures of the different foods. Out in Tamil, near where we stayed, if you walked several blocks and went down different alleys, then you came to the Buddhist area, and there was a monastery there, and then all of these shops, and in these shops you would see mothers and families coming with their sons that were studying. They were studying in the monastery, and they would buy their books and their prayer wheels and all their cloth for their robes, and it was a glimpse into that part of life, sending your son to school to study. This was the tightest crowd that I was in, and this was everybody coming out the day before Tihar started to get the food and the different things that they wanted for celebrating the holiday. These are several tankas that are quite extraordinary. I got to meet a lama and sit with him and talk about tankas, and I was going to bring one tanka home, and I wound up bringing 9 tankas home and gifted them and had a few that people chose to purchase. But each one, the colors, they're all hand painted intricately, telling a story. They're beautiful. I fell in love with these felted fairies and the yak wool shawls. Those are things that I like to bring home also, to make available to people back here in Floyd. Must have been a safe place. You see a bunch of dogs sleeping at the temple steps, so they were obviously quite comfortable. And in closing, this is just a view outside of our hotel room of Kathmandu. Nepal is a great place to travel, and if anyone ever wanted to go there on their own, I could give you some ideas, and hopefully this will help you find your way as well. But I also love taking small groups. We have a group of 10 committed to going this year. We'll be there in November for 2 weeks, and we will also lead a tour in 2019. So if folks are curious about these travels or other destinations, I do travel all over the world, specialize in honeymoons, and I also help people plan their own individual trips, whether it's a cruise or a land tour. But if it's travel, I'm involved, and I'm looking forward to talking to others about travel. Thank you. If you would like to contact me to speak about travel, you can reach me at my website, that is roseofthewindstravel.com, and my email is roseofthewindstravel@gmail.com. Namaste. A greeting of farewell and hello in Nepal.